Ladies and gentlemen, Chris Van Hollen admits his public relations stunt was taxpayer funded. Hit subscribe to this channel right now. He could easily be indicted, prosecuted, or arrested, indicted, prosecuted for breaking and violating the Logan Act. He went to El Salvador not only for a public relations stunt, but to alter existing U.S. foreign policy. The Supreme Court did not allow Van Hollen or anyone else to go to another country to negotiate the release of an individual that is in the hands of another country. Negotiated with the United States, that's foreign policy. If El Salvador and the United States negotiate a foreign policy deal that spans beyond politics, stops at the ends at the water's edge, that spans beyond the Supreme Court decision. The Supreme Court decision has nothing to do with what Van Hollen did. This is Van Hollen admitting, ladies and gentlemen, it was taxpayer funded, which is also legally a sticky point.
So a lot of questions there. First of all, who did pay for this trip?
This was an officially cleared, congressional trip, cleared on a bipartisan basis. Yes, like every other trip like the trip Kristi Noem took with.
Kristi Noem didn't negotiate with Nayib Bukele or representatives of El Salvador to alter U.S. foreign policy. Also, the funds appropriated through taxpayer dollars, I don't believe Comer, I don't believe the House Speaker, I don't believe anyone in Congress, running Congress now, the Republicans, knew that Van Hollen was going to try to alter U.S. foreign policy, which is what took place.
With her fashion show before CCOT, like the trip that 5 Republican members of the House took, like the day before when they went into CCOT.
Those Republicans were bolstering U.S. foreign policy because U.S. foreign policy begins with the president's executive order, his State Department guidelines, Marco Rubio running the State Department. You'll hear from President Bukele and Marco Rubio and President Trump in a second. What he did was try to alter existing U.S. foreign policy. Now, this is the Logan Act. Okay, you can read it. Chris Van Hollen broke and violated the Logan Act. If he wanted to actually help Mr. Garcia or anyone who was wrongfully deported, 8 U.S. Code 1231 or any appropriate statute, Democrats, David Hogg or Carville, or any of these Democrats that really care about people can alter and reform existing U.S. laws. Democrats, AOC, Bernie Sanders, Chris Van Hollen, if they really cared, could simply alter existing U.S. laws through bills in Congress and run on that in 2026. Instead, it's the morally superior performance artist or acting as always. Now watch this. This is testimony that could lead to Van Hollen's arrest, indictment, prosecution, and conviction. President Bukele states that this is foreign policy now. And Marco Rubio clearly states this is foreign policy. This is how Van Hollen or any other Democrat could get arrested and indicted and prosecuted and convicted under the Logan Act. You cannot, as a Democrat, fly to another country, try to alter existing U.S. foreign policy, and then say, well, the Supreme Court made me do it. The Supreme Court did not tell Democrats to go to El Salvador. The Supreme Court did not allow Van Hollen to try to negotiate the release, which, by the way, is under the decision, the jurisdiction of the government of El Salvador. So the Supreme Court did not say try to alter existing U.S. foreign policy, especially when an individual who is a citizen of that country is living in the country, and the president of that country, you can hear now, refuses to send the individual back to the United States of America.
Because of the foreign terrorist designation. This issue was then, by a district court judge, completely inverted, and a district court judge tried to tell the administration that they had to kill.
And by the way, the gentleman, Mr. Garcia, could be a great family man, great father. God bless him and his family. Democrats are doing nothing but hurting his cause, I believe. That's number one. Number two, because they're not altering any existing legislation. Number two, President Bukele turned his country from a very dangerous place into one of the safest places in the world. Okay? This is something that no world leader has been able to do. But President Bukele has been able to do that. He's going to explain exactly how.
Kidnap a citizen of El Salvador and fly him back here. That issue was raised to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court said the district court order was unlawful, and its main components were reversed 9-0 unanimously, stating clearly that neither Secretary of State nor the President could be compelled by anybody to forcibly retrieve a citizen of El Salvador from El Salvador, who again is a member of MS-13, which, as I'm sure you understand, rapes little girls, murders women, murders children, is engaged in the most barbaric activities in the world, and I can promise you, if he was your neighbor, you would move right away.
So you don't plan to ask for
But the Supreme Court is asking to.
Is
And
that-
what was the ruling in the Supreme Court, Steve? Was it 9-0
Yes, it was a 9-0
in our favor?
in our favor against the district court ruling, saying that no district court has the power to compel the foreign policy function of the United States. As Pam said, the ruling solely stated that if this individual, at El Salvador's sole discretion, was sent back to our country, that we could deport him a second time.
Well,
No version of this legally ends up with him ever living here because he is a citizen of El Salvador. That is the president of El Salvador. Your questions about it, per the court, can only be directed to him.
I asked
¿Usted lo
President
liberaría,
Bukele,
Presidente
what is your-
Bukele?
can President Bukele weigh in on this? Do you plan to return him?
Well, I'm suppose you're not suggesting that I smuggle terrorists into the United States, right?
It's always
How can I smuggle? How can I return him to the United States? Like I smuggle him into the United States, or what do I do? Of course, I'm not going to do it. It's like, the question is preposterous. How can I smuggle a terrorist into the United States? I don't have the power to return him to the United States.
But you can release him inside El Salvador.
Yeah, but I'm not releasing. I mean, we're not very fond of releasing terrorists into our country. I mean, we just turned the murder capital of the world into the safest country of the Western Hemisphere, and you want us to go back into releasing criminals so we can go back to being the murder capital of the world? No, that's not going to happen.
Well, they'd love to have a criminal, released into our
I mean, there's a fascination.
They would love it.
Yeah.
They're sick. These are sick people. Marco, do you have something to say about
Yeah, I mean, Stephen Eitland, I don't understand what the confusion is. This individual is a citizen of El Salvador. He was illegally in the United States and was returned to his country. That's where you deport people, back to their country of origin, except for Venezuela that wasn't refusing to take people back, or places like that. I can tell you this, Mr. President, no, the foreign policy of the United States is conducted by the President of the United States, not by a court. And no court in the United States has a right to conduct the foreign policy of the United States. It's that simple. End of story.
And that's what the Supreme Court held, by the way, to Marco's point. The Supreme Court said exactly what Marco said, that no court has the authority to compel the foreign policy function of the United States. We won a case 9-0, and people like CNN are portraying it as a loss.
The foreign policy of the United States is not decided by Chris Van Hollen. Okay, check this out. Again, if Mr. Garcia or anyone found Jesus, found God, religion, changed his life, and was a great family man, God bless him. You can join an organization or gang, a criminal organization, change your life, and, find God and, build a business. A lot of these things could take place. The problem, however, is that U.S. foreign policy, a negotiated deal between President Bukele and President Trump, Article 2 of the U.S. Constitution, allows the president, as commander-in-chief, to enforce laws, but also gives president broad authority in terms of foreign policy. Check this out. And also, look, this is a sheriff talking about Van Hollen and his impact on the community.
Well, it's absolutely appalling that this is where Senator Van Hollen and many Democrats, the many that are down there right now, want to focus their efforts on an individual who certainly has MS-13 ties, and I 100% believe, 1,000% believe him to be an MS-13 member from everything I've read out of the police reports and what has been released. This isn't just an average person on the street. This is somebody that the police have looked at and been able to tie, and 2 immigration judges have tied him to MS-13. This just isn't a victim of of circumstance, of unfortunate circumstance. This is an individual who should not be in our country, who was ordered for removal, and the mistake being apparently he couldn't be removed to El Salvador. I agree with one of the earlier guests I saw in an earlier program. If that's the case, then take him to the embassy in El Salvador, do the paperwork, and move him somewhere else. But he does not need to be in this country victimizing the citizens here.
Again, this is an issue that Democrats could simply alter or address by altering existing U.S. laws. Now, undocumented, documented immigrants should understand the Democratic Party does not want to alter these laws. These are existing U.S. laws. They want public relations stunts that break existing U.S. laws like the Logan Act. Okay? If the Democratic Party was serious about helping undocumented immigrants, they would reform and pass bills and legislation that amended or reformed existing immigration laws that deport undocumented immigrants for committing crimes. They should run on that in 2026. Democrats are mortified of their own alleged value system, so they would never run on that because they know they would lose by an even greater margin nationally than they already did in 24. Van Hollen broke the Logan Act with taxpayer-funded. It's a taxpayer-funded violation of the Logan Act. Hit subscribe to this channel. It's what he did was try to alter U.S. foreign policy. Hit subscribe. I'll be back in a couple of hours.